Okay, so we are recording. So, you know, what I'm hoping is, and it's going to be interesting. This will you're probably the last cohort, I would think, maybe one more, that will only get one course in qualitative. I believe you have not had the quantitative one yet, or have you?
We
No.
have not.
Right. So your quantitative will be next, but you've had 803 and 810, which sort of got you into the mode of this. What we're doing is in the program, probably next year, is that there will be 2 quarters of qualitative research because of the complexity of understanding, particularly doing coding and doing interviewing techniques, that we really believe that many students need at least 2 quarters of this, because in doing a lot of dissertations, some of the problems that we're running into, particularly in the qualitative side of this, is related to not a deeper understanding of what coding process is about. So you'll get some of that, you know, the introduction to that over the next 10 weeks. So let me get into this. Basically tonight, I just want to give you an overview of what's coming up, and then I'm going to talk about the next 2 Zooms, so I have some dates for it, because I did not have them in the syllabus. I've been kind of piecemealing the syllabus together, and what I mean by that is I haven't, and this should raise your anxiety level, I haven't taught this course for 4 years. I taught it in the beginning when we first started this, so I'm coming back into this, and I'm making some I've been readjusting the syllabus a little bit, so that I don't want you to have to labor on writing massive papers of X number of pages, because you're going to see in all these assignments, I'm leaving it up to you to determine how much information you have to give me in order to show that you understand what we're doing. So I think that's going to be important. And again, as I've always tried to, you know, if you guys remember, you know, when I do this, my role here is to facilitate the learning space. And I truly see you as both teacher and learner. So that's how it works. And, you know, to me, that's very important. And my role is to help guide you through the process. And so as we go through this, that's why I want to spend a little bit of time on, you know, what the books are, what we're doing, what the assignments are, and then just lead you in real quickly to 2 of the assignments that are coming up over the next 2 weeks. So you'll have a sense for what that's about. And as usual, anytime as I am rambling on, you have a question, just interrupt and, you know, ask questions, etc. So with that, first of all, I want to say it's great to see you guys again. Haven't seen you for 2 quarters, I believe, since the last time we've interacted. And I'm looking forward to this, working with you again. And so the books that we're doing, this is your main book, basically, the Cresswell book. It's the 3rd edition. Make sure you have a 3rd edition. If you have a 2nd edition, I can readjust if you ended up getting that. But the 3rd edition is his updated one. And so if you notice in this week's readings, I basically have you going through chapters 1 through 4. But what I want you to concentrate on is basically chapter 2, which is the philosophical assumptions and interpretive frameworks, and chapter 4, the different types of qualitative research that are there. So what happens then, along with that book, is this particular book, which is excellent also. And so she basically takes a lot of the concepts that you're reading in Cresswell and expands them in a way that at times I feel is much more readable. So I have you looking at chapters 1 and 2 from her book, and basically we're talking about what is qualitative research, and what are the types of that in relationship to chapter 4, in beginning to think about designing the assignments that you're going to be doing over the 10 weeks. And then this third book, which is a very important book and will be one that you will use, particularly whether you do a mixed method or a pure qualitative study, is John A. Saldana's Coding Manual for Qualitative Researchers. And this book really is a manual for you to help you to truly understand the coding process. And you will be doing some interviewing, and you will be transcribing, and you will be coding so that you get a sense of what that process is. So that's your 3 books. And in the syllabus also, there are, supplementary texts that I put in there that go anywhere from phenomenological research, case study research, narrative, and another book related to coding. So those books are there for you to explore if you're interested in doing those. Particularly, I will tell you, if you start migrating towards a phenomenological study, and I will tell you the 2 professors that generally do phenomenological dissertations are myself and Dr. Bureau, who was out in Sacramento as the head of the Sacramento. And as you know, we have closed down the Sacramento site, and also we have decreased or not actually having Harrisburg anymore. So Ed will be involved, and you might be having Dr. Bureau in some of your courses. So the Vagel book as a supplementary is an excellent one in terms of phenomenological study and Van Man. So those things are there as you begin to explore what you want to do, if you're doing it as a pure qualitative or a mixed study. But these 3 books will help you greatly. So what I want to do is go over the assignments. And the first 3 assignments are designed, basically, the first one is this reflective journal. And I've been thinking about this because I've said, to share this, to use this as a wiki, you can do it as a blog, etc. But if you want to do that, that's fine. But what I really think I would like you to do is to keep your own personal journals. And as I said in there, at the end of the 5th week, what I want you to do is send me a 1-page, 2-page reflection of what you're learning from the journal, and then you'll do that at the end of the course. So I have it there where you can share with people. Well, you can share if you want to, as you interact with each other, that's fine. But I think I'm going to move this now to, I want you weekly to write about your process as you're exploring the different avenues of material that you're reading in the book and your assignments, and that you keep a journal. But what my expectation is that you are writing every day, or at least every other day, as you think about qualitative research. So does that make sense to you, to all of you? So as I see all the muted buttons up there, I'm guessing it does. So I'm going to move on. But I want you to just think about that, because if you remember, one of the things about reflective learning is that the more you discover who you are in relationship to that material, I think it becomes much more beneficial to get you writing, because that becomes the important component of this. But this is your journal. It's not mine. Okay?
So this doesn't necessarily have to be a blog or a wiki then, correct?
No, it does not. That's why I said, if you want to put something up as a blog or wiki and let us know, that's fine. But no, I want you to just keep a personal journal.
Okay, just making sure. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Now, the second, whoops, hang on one second.
Dr. Gould.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Tara, by the way.
Yes.
Let me change my name from PBS the admin. I don't know why, but
Okay.
the journal we're writing, though, the audience is ourselves, so it doesn't have to be formal or anything. It can be very reflective.
It's just reflective. Think about it from the point of view of theory U.
Okay, great.
Okay? That's exactly how I want you to look at it, because I was reading that this afternoon, thinking about this as I was putting the slides together, and a former colleague had people do that, but the more I'm thinking about it is, I want this to be a highly reflective journal for yourselves. But what I do want you to do twice during the course, as I have in there, is to email me just, one page synopsis of what's going on inside of your head as you're looking at this stuff. Okay? So that's that. Now the second
Dr. Gould, I have a
yes.
hi. I have a quick question.
Yes.
On the week one on the bottom, it says a voice thread introduction.
Yeah, well, that's I believe, in there. So if you haven't used VoiceThread before, because there's a VoiceThread built into this, I don't know if I'm going to have you use it or not. Probably not, but that's what it's there for. That's
Okay.
into it now. All the courses, I believe, have that in now.
Okay.
Okay? So don't worry about it unless they say, okay, do something in that. Generally, what you're going to be doing is writing more so than, just, presenting in some other format. Okay? So the researcher's stance, and I hope you downloaded that. It's very simple little page. Can you see this as I'm holding it up, what it is? I'm hoping you can. If not, you just download it. All I want you to do on that is you're going to be looking at the philosophical points of view. You're going to be looking at the imperative community, and you'll see that in a couple minutes as we go through that. And that's in your readings, as I said, chapter 2 in Cresswell, and in chapter 4, well, not so much 4, chapter 2 particularly. I want you to look at that, and then also when you look at Miriam's book, chapter 2, begin to kind of tease out where you're leaning towards from both a philosophical point of view and from the interpretive. And I'll cover that in a couple minutes, what that is. And so on that paper, I just want you, put your name on it and just lay out, well, here's my philosophical approach that I think I'm having right now. Here's the paradigm. Here's my worldview. That all follows the material that is in Cresswell. So I want you to just do that. And then when I get that from you, it'll give me a little bit of insight where I can begin to, get conversation with each one of you about where your philosophical underpinnings are. Because when you do your dissertation, a major component of it, whether you do it as, a qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method, you're going to put in a theoretical framework in chapter 1. So this leads into it allows the reader to understand what your theoretical point of view is as it relates to your study. Okay? So all I want you to do is that once I get that back, that's going to give me some insight in how you're looking at the Cresswell, and then I'll be able to, give you some guidance in relationship to that. So that stance chart is very important to the beginning of your theoretical framework. Now, I said I want that this Sunday. If you need a couple extra days, to digest this as you're putting together, that's fine. Just let me know that you're going to need a couple extra days. And then the last one, and this will be towards the end, is called Turning the Story. And what's going to happen is that by, I think, the 7th or 8th week I have you doing this, you will know what your problem statement is, and you'll know what your research question is from a qualitative point of view. So what's going to happen, though, because you're being exposed to 4 other lenses as a researcher, what I'm going to have you do then is take your initial question and then rewrite it from the other 4 points of view. How would you rewrite that question? So if you're doing ethnography, so let's just say you're doing a case study and you wrote your research question from a case study point of view. Well, I'm going to ask you, okay, now how would you rewrite that in a phenomenological point of view? How would you write it from an ethnography? That will help you to understand the nuances in terms of the research design and will give me some insight in your understanding of the differences between that. So that's not a real difficult process as we get into that, but it will help you greatly down the road. Okay? So these are the 3 assignments that sit outside your major activity for the 10 weeks. So what that major activity is basically this. So we have 4 assignments that will help you to design a qualitative study. So we broke it down in stages so that I will be able to give you feedback as you're going along. So that first stage, when you look at it in your syllabus, is basically this. All I want you to do is to put together actually a 1 or 2 page sketch of a mini qualitative fieldwork project that you like to do. And you can base it upon what you put together. And I believe you did a sample chapter 1, 2, and 3 in 803, 810. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And so you can take that, as the starting point, but depending on how you did it, I want you to be able to put it into a qualitative, hi, someone's drawing on my screens. That's cool. So I want you to put it onto a qualitative approach. But I also want you to understand, as you read deeper into this, you might tweak it a little bit as we go along. So what that first thing you're going to give me is kind of a sketch of how you think you're going to design your study during this 10 weeks. All right? It's not complicated. It's just 2-page sketch. I'll give you a little bit more feedback on that as you get into it, but that's your first major assignment. That will allow me to see whether or not you are, putting the process together in a way that will allow you to develop a research question that's going to allow you to do interviews. You're going to do some interviews. I don't care who it is. It can be your children. It can be friends. It doesn't matter. But you're going to do an interview so that interview will get you data for the research question that you're looking at. So any comments, questions about that right now? Should have a sense of what this is from 803 and 810. So it's really taking what you have probably put together in a chapter 1, 2, and 3, and now just bringing it, if you're going to use that as the framework, then you're going to put it totally into a qualitative approach. And all I want from you then is basically a 2-page sketch of what that's going to look like. So then what that leads into then is the transcription draft. So you're going to go out and you're going to do some interviews. So you're going to either conduct an interview, you're going to observe something, notes on it, or you might do a focus group. You're going to record that information in a protocol format, which is in Cresswell, and I'll have that, I'll guide you through that process because we'll do a Zoom related to that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to transcribe all that data that you collected using coding process. So really what you're going to be looking at here is what's the general topic of your research. You're going to ask what are the subtopics, those questions. Then you're going to create questions that you are going to interview people about to get some information to answer that question. So you're going to start putting together the protocol for doing interview. Okay? So then after that, what you will do is after you collected the data, then the third one is you're going to code that data. So that's where the Sylvanus book comes in. I'll be doing a Zoom on, what coding looks like. I have a couple videos available for you to look at. So what you will do then is you will transcribe whatever data you collected and you'll run a code through it. And you'll learn what stage 1 coding is about, stage 2, and then from that you will begin to look at those codes and see if any themes emerge out of that data that you collected. Now, don't, worry about it at this particular point. I'm just giving you a general overview because we'll go in depth with each one of these stages. And then finally, the last thing you're going to do is you're going to put together then a academic paper on your findings, which is sort of like what you did in chapters 1, 2, and 3, but it's not going to be detailed. It's up to you. So the structure for that is that you're going to have a title, a short abstract, you're going to do an introduction, you're going to talk about the methods that you used, what were the findings, what were the results, and what are some of the conclusions and recommendations that you have related to this. Now, how many pages? It's up to you to be able to determine what is necessary to get across to the reader an understanding of what your findings and discussions from the data that you collected. So if you want a rule of thumb, you're probably looking anywhere from 7 to maybe 12 pages tops. It depends on you. Depends on how well you write and how well you communicate. You also can utilize visuals within a paper too. So you can create tables or maybe some graphic representations of that data. But again, I'll be guiding you through that process. It's not like, okay, guys, this is what you got to do. I'll see you in 10 weeks and then give me the paper. So we're not doing that. I'll take you through each step, but I want to just make sure you understand the process to a qualitative, which is not much different than what you did in 803 and 810. So that's your design process. That's what you're going to be the deliverable for this course. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is just, okay, what is qualitative research? What is it? What is it about? So quite simply, as you begin to look at this, what we're really doing is we're looking at how, why, and what is happening. What's going on? How does a group of people think about a certain phenomenon? So, for example, a friend of mine just is defending their dissertation, and they did a phenomenological study, an IPA study, on a group of emotional behavioral disorder kids who were in a school in Western Canada, an online school, who were interacting with a virtual learning game called Questalantis. So what that person wanted to do was understand how a couple of kids who are emotional behavioral disorders would interact and learn in a virtual learning environment. So the phenomenon there was the Questalantis, and what she was teasing out is what was the experience of these kids? What was their story? So that would be an example. Why does a certain group of people do things the way they do them? So you might want to do a case study, in terms of understanding, why certain groups are, function the way they do. You could do an ethnography, but to tell you the truth, you're not going to do an ethnography in this EDD program because you don't have enough time to do one if you do it appropriately. But what you're looking at here is looking at and comparing how certain groups of people do things, or what does the daily life of a group of people look like? So you might want to do a narrative of, let's say, science teachers or math teachers or special ed teachers, or the day in the life of a group of administrators within a school district. So qualitative research is looking at the how, the why, and the what. And I think that to one extent is what becomes critical. So common characteristics. So when you look at the work of Cresswell, these are the things that he says. The research takes place in a natural setting. You will go in, if you're working in a school, you'll be in a school building. It could be your building. It could be, understanding how kids operate within, let's say, detention or anything of that nature? Or how does coaching work with teachers? So the key instrument of data collection is the researcher. It's you. You're the ones collecting it. Qualitative researchers use multiple methods of data collection, multiple sources, triangulation, interviews, artifacts, things of that nature. Then the qualitative researcher builds patterns. So what coding does is begins to look at what are the types of commonalities that might come out of an interview, and how do you begin to label the categories? And then from that, what are the type of themes that might emerge? And it comes from a bottom-up inductive process. So some of you might feel like with using that process might want to use a research methodology of grounded theory. So, and you'll see what those are, as we get deeper into this course. And then the qualitative research focuses on learning participant meaning and understanding, particularly when you do case study and you do phenomenological research. And again, this is all in Cresswell, but I just want to, cover these. So really, your methods of collecting data many times are interviews, they're questions, they're looking at artifacts, you're looking at records, you're looking at drawings. So if you're looking at kids, you might look at their drawings, you might look at, you're trying to study, the patterns of behaviors or relationships, maybe a school board. So some of the artifacts you might use are board minutes, etc. The researcher positions themselves in a qualitative study. One of the things you're going to learn a lot about is how do you bracket your assumptions while you're collecting data. So if you think about theory U, one of the most important things, remember in theory U, was the ability to hold back in terms of downloading, your habitual way of seeing things, and also understanding how to bracket out your own voice of judgment, your own voice of cynicism, or even your voice of fear. So I want to make that connection back to some of the materials that you went through in 800 and in 625 in particular. And so qualitative research then really develops and presents a holistic account of the problem that's being studied. So you begin to look for a story to emerge that will allow you as the researcher to put yourself then into that story in order to make recommendations, in order to make analysis of the data that you have collected. So that's really you really are much more subjective in terms of qualitative research. You're also in the field, whereas when you're doing pure quantitative research, you are not part of it. You need to learn how to objectify it. And really, if any of you are physics teachers, there's in physics, the concept of the Heisenberg principle is that once I look at something, I alter it. That's what qualitative research is about. Whereas in quantitative research, you have to not alter what you're looking at. Okay, so any questions about this quick overview in terms of the characteristics? And I might be repeating stuff that hopefully you covered in particularly, I think in 803 in the introduction when you looked at those different things. Okay?
So Dr. Gould,
yes.
So with qualitative, just based on what you're explaining to us, is there a certain amount of bias that's just going to automatically be there?
Yep.
So our job is to, whether we're doing mixed methods or pure qualitative, our job is to minimize that bias to the best of our ability.
Yeah, well, it's called bracketing.
Bracketing?
Yes, bracket. So remember in theory U, the idea of what downloading is?
Mm-hmm.
So it's our habitual way of looking at something. So one of the reasons I'm asking you to do that researcher's stance chart is to see what are the assumptions that you carry into a qualitative approach. So for example, are you ontological? Are you epistemological? Blah, 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 blah. You'll see what those are in a couple minutes. And that's why I want you to journal. Because the more you have an understanding of the lens that you're coming from, that you know that you are part of, as a qualitative researcher, you are part of the study because you're subjectively in it. You're altering that study. But what you need to do is you're collecting the data as you're listening. Remember what generative listening was about. The idea there is to be able to bracket your assumptions. But when you get into chapter 4, you can let them loose in terms of allowing your experience, because then you become part of the research itself. Okay? And that, hopefully that will become clearer as we get into this data, and particularly as you start reading those initial chapters that I have you doing this week. So what that means then, so finding your stance. So where you're going to find your stance really comes out of chapter 2 of Cresswell. That's the philosophical assumptions and the imperative framework. That's going to give you a pretty good lens of understanding, at least at this point, who you are as a researcher. All right. So what that means is this. So the key questions that Cresswell raises here is, where do the philosophical and theoretical frameworks fit into an overall research project or a process? And as I said to you in chapter 1, now when you wrote your chapter 1s, did you not do a theoretical framework? Do you remember?
We did.
Yeah, so what that theoretical framework came from, and I believe, and I don't know who you had for those 2 courses, you probably did the famous Ken Moritz Saunders onion, peeling back those levels so you can get deeper into who you are. So one of the things you're going to be wrestling with is, where does this fit in terms of my understanding of my philosophical assumptions? What are those assumptions? You'll see those in a minute. And then, how are the philosophical assumptions used and written into a philosophical stance? That's very important to know who you are from your own point of view, because what that does actually, so learn the question you asked about, how do I control or bracket my assumptions, is that you have an awareness of where they are, so you know how to turn them off while you're listening to another person. So what happens then is, so the role of the philosophical assumptions or the paradigms of the worldview what Cresswell says then is, when a researcher undertakes a qualitative study, you're really agreeing to its underlying philosophical assumptions. So if I'm going to do a phenomenological approach, I'm probably going to have some epistemological point of view and an ontological point of view. You'll see what they are in a couple minutes if you're not familiar with that terminology. So once you choose out of the 5 research designs, of which really you're going to probably choose only 4, because the ethnography probably does not fit well into this length of time you have to do your EDD. But what it does is then the researcher brings to the study their own worldviews that shape the direction of the study. So why are you doing it? So you said to us, well, I asked that researcher said to me, well, you're going to be the director of this program, but you're also going to research it. Well, what she's asking you to do then is to really begin to look at, what's my philosophical view? What do I bring to the table? And can I do it in my own environment because of these lenses that I have? So some researchers then use an imperative lens, and you'll see what that is in a couple minutes. So that's the role of what they are. So here's the assumptions that you're going to deal with. Ontological is really that if you're trying to understand the nature of reality, of how a person experiences something or how you experience something, you're coming then from an ontological point of view. It's a philosophical underpinning. So if you want to understand, to know what they know, and you're looking at it from a learning point of view, you're understanding epistemology. That's the philosophical underpinnings. If you want to look at the values in research, what are the values I'm bringing? Axiological. If you want to look at the language of the research, then rhetorical. And then finally, methods used in the process of the research is the methodological approach. And Cresswell will take you into each one of these. So for example, and I think I have a couple of these. So the question, if your study, as you begin to look at trying to develop a qualitative research study, is you're going to, well, what's the nature of reality? So the characteristics are reality is multiple, is seen through many different points of view. So how does a kid see a science program like STEM versus how a teacher perceives a science program like STEM? How do I experience it? So the implication for practice is that the research then reports those different perspectives as themes. So here's the themes that emerged from maybe 6 kids that I did maybe 3 deep interviews with. Here's the themes that emerged from 6 teachers who I did deep interviews with. So that's what ontological. I want to understand their experiences versus an epistemological. So what counts as knowledge? How's knowledge claims justified? What is the relationship between the researcher and what is being researched? So here, if you look at the implications for practice, the researcher then collaborates and spends time in the field with the participants to become an insider and relies on quotes from the participants as evidence to show that this is what it means to be a STEM teacher. This is the concept. So this is the knowledge that they have. This is what epistemology is looking at. And again, I'm going through this quickly, so you'll have time to think about these as you go through. So next question is, what's the role of value? So researchers acknowledge that research is value-laden. There's biases. Now, for example, take a look at, so let's just use about, this would be an ethnography. Take a look at the relationship between the African-American community and police in the United States of America. So that, to one extent, could be a study of values, of how the biases interact in the actions of people over time. Because since that's very politically charged and it's very, very sociologically charged right now, the researcher then really openly discusses the values that shape the narrative that's going on, either from an African-American community or from the community of the police. That's one way of beginning to look at that. So it shapes the narrative and includes their own interpretation. So what I said to you, there's where you would unbracket your analysis and your philosophical view to do an analysis of the data that you collected from people. So, but it's values. It's going towards, this is what I believe and this is why I act the way I do. Okay? So, again, I'm recording this, so if you want to go over it again, you want to put yourself to sleep, you can watch this video again. But I want you to at least start getting into your heads about, all right, what's a methodological philosophical assumption? So there you're beginning to ask, what's the purpose of the research? What's the language of the research? So here you might use inductive logic. And then what you're trying to do, and a lot of times you might see this emerging out of what is called grounded theory, that you're collecting all this data, and then as the researcher, you then begin to create generalizations from that data and begin to develop a theoretical framework for why the things are happening. So again, this is why I want you to spend a little time on what's your point of view, where are you coming from? You don't need to be these. These are just, I think, if you remember when you did the 10 personas, I think you guys did 10 personas. The idea there was to look at the creativity and how you would perceive yourself from a creative point of view. Well, what happens here is, I just want you to now begin to say, yeah, this is how I think, maybe no, I don't think this way. I wouldn't like to do my study this way because my tendency is to move more towards this particular ontological point of view or to a epistemological point of view. So that's why, again, that researcher stance chart will be your first attempt at dealing with that. And then as I look at it, I can then begin to query you about that. Now, what comes out of this then, the imperative? So the definition of a paradigm, a basic set of beliefs that guide an action. So you have positive, post-positivism, social constructivism, transformative frameworks, and pragmatism. So what you will read about are these particular points of view, and I've got to see if I have these in here. Yeah, so basically what Cresswell has put together for you in the chart is, so if I'm looking at a post-positivism, so if I'm coming from an ontological point of view, really what I'm asking here is the single reality exists beyond ourselves. So if you think about Plato's allegory of the cave, you remember what that is. That's pretty ontological in its point of view from a post-positive point of view. The researcher's bias need to be controlled and kept out of the study if you're doing an axiological belief structure. Why? Because if you don't, you're going to screw up and not listen to what the other person is saying. So social constructivism, basically, if you look across these, you'll get a sense of how those imperative frameworks work through. So I want you to just read through these, and then as you begin to think about them, and if questions begin to percolate in your own mind, just let me know, email me, and then we can talk about it. But I want each one of you to look at this from this point of view. And the other one, the second part of this then is pragmatism. What reality is, what it is useful for. It's practical. It's how it works. And then if you look at, now, you're going to read about critical analysis. You're going to look at race analysis, feminism, queer, and also disability, because those imperative frameworks at the bottom deal with marginalized people. So there is a imperative framework to that, and particularly, and I have a couple students who've been doing a lot of analysis in their dissertation work looking at gay and lesbian transgender students within schools from that imperative framework. So those are the types of studies, and and I think you've done this in 810 and 803, you've been going through research, you've been looking at these. Now what happens is, the question as you read a research paper, now you need to begin to think about what's the philosophical framework that the individual researchers coming from. Most times they will say what it is, and what is the imperative framework that they're coming from. How do they look at the world? Are they pragmatic, or are they working with marginalized people? So that's what you're going to start diving into. And I know this is a lot right now, and to tell you the truth, I have no idea how deep you got into this in 803 particularly, but you're going to get into this much more deeper in the beginning of the first 2 or 3 weeks of this course. So any questions right now? What's percolating in your mind as you're getting inundated with this material?
Okay, so I have a quick question. With the researcher's stance chart, the third part is social interpretive communities. Will you be covering that tonight?
Basically, no. But it's when you go through it, you will see that. So the question is, what are the, how did those interpretive, and let me make sure I'm telling you the truth. Yes, I am telling you the truth. So when you look at those things, what's the community? And you'll see Cresswell will talk about those types of communities. And what I want you to do then is to try to tease out where you fit in his definitions of these. That's all I want you to do. And again, you might find out by the end of 10 weeks, I'm not even close to what I gave you in the beginning, which is okay. All right?
I guess a follow-up question is social constructionism, is that an interpretive community? Because I got that answer for 2 and 3. Am I wrong?
No, what it is the social imperative. So if you look at social constructivism as that point of view and that community, yeah, because social constructivist. So I'm a social constructivist because I think we construct, and and I have a tendency to fluctuate between ontology and epistemology, because if you remember when I always would talk about designing curriculum, that we need to do it from a constructivist point of view. And so that puts me into a social constructivist lens. That's how I look at the world. That's how I look at learning. Whereas if you're pragmatic and you fall within a pragmatic point of view about the world, knowledge is knowledge and that's what it is. And therefore, you can use standardized testing to one extent because it's very pragmatic to get a point of view of whether or not a kid knows something. Very pragmatic. So what I want you to do is to look at, okay, what's my worldview based upon when you look at how you go deeper into, and particularly Merriam's book will help you to look at that and just tease that out and say, okay, here's my worldview. Here's the paradigm I'm working from. Now, where does it fit into my social community? Where do I work in that? You'll have indicators on how you can answer that question. I'm leaving it nebulous for you because I want to see how you come up with it. All of you. Okay? So, any other questions? And I know I'm giving you a lot right now, but it's okay because sometimes, if you remember, I'm being highly divergent right now and I'm just throwing this stuff out, and then it's up to you to kind of like, okay, I'm going to play around with this. Yeah, this does make sense because some of it might be totally meaningless to you, which is okay. And what I mean by that is because that's not your lens. That's not how you think. So again, an easy way of looking at this, so a narrative design. So now if we begin to look at the designs, so once you begin to think about this, because once you get a sense of your researcher stance, it's going to influence the design you're going to do. So in narrative design, you're interested in telling a story. You want people to develop a story so you can understand. So a phenomenological study, you want to understand how a person experiences whatever phenomenon it is. So a phenomenon could be, like as I said, a friend of mine was, the phenomenon they were looking at was virtual reality learning.
Do you guys have dessert?
Another student I had did their dissertation on what is it like to be retained in 7th grade. So she did interviews and stories came out that these kids told their stories. So that's what phenomenology is about. Grounded theory, as I said to you, is that what happens is that you collect this data from stories from people that are in a particular environment or a particular question. And then what you do from the analysis of this is to create a theory that might explain what you found from the study, from the data you collected. Then case study is an in-depth portrait of cases. As I said, it could be a case study, a multiple case study between 3 buildings in the use of coaching practices within those buildings. So I'm just giving you some things, to begin to think about. Then ethnography, you're not going to do an ethnography because really what you're doing is you need a good year and a half to do ethnographies because there you're trying to understand the culture of a group, how it operates. So these, basically what I'm telling you is probably narrative design, phenomenological study, grounded theory, or case study, or a mixed method using these with a quantitative approach, to collect the data. If you remember, either you're going to have a big qual, small quan, or large quan, small qual, if you remember that terminology from 803 and 810. So looking at Cresswell, what he does is gives you, in that chapter 4, I believe, is that, okay, here's the focus of what a narrative does, what a phenomenology does, what a grounded theory does, ethnography, and case study. So when you look at these, this will help you to begin to say, yeah, I'm going to gravitate towards this type of study. So best design for narratives, telling story. So we just looked at that, describing phenomenologies, describing the essence of a lived phenomena. Grounded theory is grounding theory in the view of the participants. And then you can see ethnography, you can understand, but we're not going to do that. And then case study is providing in-depth understanding of the cases. And then he continues on with that. So the disciplinary backgrounds, narratives you generally see in anthropology, literature, history, psychology, sociology. Now, if you notice something, phenomenology you find a lot in education. It's an interesting approach. You also find it in nursing quite a bit, in the medical field. Sociology, a lot of times grounded theory. Ethnography, obviously, is anthropology and sociology. Case study, you could put education in there, psychology, law, political science, etc. So this is how Cresswell teases out generally what you use that particular approach for, depending on what your study is and what field it's in. And the analysis, the unit of analysis, narrative, you can use one person, could be your entire study in a narrative. Phenomenology, generally 4 to 10 people tops for an EDD. Grounded theory, again, there is your process, action, interaction among many individuals. Ethnography is an entire culture. Case study can be a single building, more than one individual, or it can be a mix, a multiple case study where you might look at the same problem as it's observed in maybe 3 different buildings or 3 different school districts or what you have. So that then is, as you continue doing this, the type of data you're going to collect, the data analysis, and the type of written report. Now, these last 3 charts, and again, they're in the Cresswell book, these will help you to begin to think about your final project for this course. So this, look at this, think about what you developed in chapter 1, 2, and 3. If you did a mixed study, if you did qualitative, did a quantitative, you might be able to use that, but you're going to specifically design it around one of the 4, and I'm going to use just 4. If you really want to do an ethnography, fine. I'm not going to fight you on it, but what I'm going to tell you is that you're going to design your project around one of these 5 approaches. Okay, comments, questions right now? Thoughts? I'm looking at the expressions on your faces. Nice smile. Okay, good, John. Good smile. Let's see, who else do we have in here? Okay, Jonathan, all right. Now, who is PVSD Administration 16? I don't have you on my class list. Who might you be?
This is Tara. That's just the name of my iPad.
Okay, I'm looking at that. So that's Pequay Valley School District.
Perkiomen Valley. Perkiomen Valley.
Well, see, I live in Lancaster County, so that would be Pequay Valley. All right.
Yeah, this is the one that's with Cliff Rogers. He's my superintendent.
Oh, you're in trouble. I mean, yeah, that's great. Tell Cliff hi if you see him.
I will tell him.
Okay, so that, again, just let the stuff just percolate. There's no reason to worry about it right this particular. Oh, there's another one. General structure. So this will give you a sense of how to put that assignment stage number 4 together, and we'll be going through this more and more as we go on. Now, here's what I want to do is, a couple of you said, hey, there's no Zoom meetings in the syllabus, and you're correct. So I'm going to put up the next Zoom will be July 6th, Monday at 6:45. Now, what's important about these, I record all of these. So if you cannot make these, then what will happen is I upload them to a YouTube site that I have, and then you can listen to them And then if you have questions, you can ask your colleagues or you can email me. The reason I have to move that to Monday that week is I'll be in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday through Friday working on collecting some data and material for the 801 course that I'm teaching during the summer in D.C. So I'm going to do it Monday, 6:45. Hopefully the time's okay. And then the next one after that will be July 21st, back to Tuesday nights at 6:45. And again, if it interferes with your own vacations or anything of that nature, remember they are recorded. The only responsibility you have is to watch the recording. All right? So, any questions that you need to have answered right now? And that picture is probably appropriate that I have there for most of you right at this point. See, I can sit there and laugh about it, and you're like, ah! Trust me, you all do well in it. You really will. You know, once you start reading the Cresswell and the Merriam book, I think you'll find it come to you fairly quickly in understanding. You're not all of those, and I just want you to begin to find out who you are, but at least have an understanding of what those other styles are. And if you have any thoughts afterwards, as usual, you know, feel free to email me or call me at any time. You know, I will do my best to, to give you feedback on that. Because again, you're now totally focused on qualitative. You're not to worry about collecting data, mathematical formulas, or anything of that nature. What you're doing is strictly qualitative. I do not want you to do mixed method or anything. I want you to just focus on pure qualitative research. Your next course in 835, those of you who love mathematics, statistics, and stuff, you can go crazy there, because that's what you'll be doing in that particular course. So I am going to make the assumption that silence means, wow, we totally understand this, or, oh my God, I'm totally confused, but I'll sort it out, which is fine. And what I'll do is, if you do not have any other questions, feel free to leave